Hello. Very frequently I was asked the question, how do we improve in the end game? I was asked this question on a lower level, from lower level player, from mediocre player, and it's very difficult to answer. If I had to give one general answer, my answer will be this. Well, first of all, before even we get to end game, player has to be very well prepared in the opening first. It has nothing to do with the end game. In the opening first, he has to be very well prepared, and he has general knowledge of positional play, middle games, conducting plans, and only after that you have to worry about the end game stage of the game. This is very important because you cannot start learning the game from the end. No, you start from beginning. Well, but let's suppose your opening knowledge is relatively good, it's okay, and you know what you're doing in the opening, you know how to build the middle game, but you're having certain problems in the end game. Well, if I had to give general advices, my advices will be, you have to know end game theory. There is a theory on the opening. There is some concrete variations, some positions you have to know, and you cannot be figuring it out in the opening. The same thing is in the end game. You have to know certain theoretical positions that are known. It's a win, lose, draw, or whatever it is, that are known, already analyzed. You have to learn those positions, and then after that you have to know the general principles, and every end game has different main criteria. They all have one thing in common: you have to have an active king if it's really end game. But for example, in rook ending, it's very good. You absolutely must have active rook and very active king. That's better most of the time than having an extra pawn. And in a bishop ending, you have to put pawns on the color of opposite of your bishop, and so on. So I have described all these rules and all these positions on my endgame DVDs. But now I want to talk about mistakes made by average or above average players in certain positions. Well, rook endings, it's easiest to make mistakes in the rook endings, because rook endings have a tendency to transpose to the pawn endings, and in the pawn endings we know that a huge majority of the positions of pawn endings, it's not better or worse for one side or the other. It's a win, lose, or a draw. Result is already imminent if one side plays correctly. So here is the position, first position we have on the board. White has certain advantage because black's king is extremely passive, and because of that black's rook is passive too, because of the potential mate threats. So in this position, which is not good position for black, black should have tried to go king g8, h7, g6, or tried to go maybe h5 and give a pawn up and then try to come out with a king to create some counterplay. Whatever they would do was better than what they did. They played rook e6, which allowed forced win for white by playing rook d8, check, and here we're going to pawn ending. It was accurately calculated by white, and they have a forced win. Rook e8, rook takes e8, king takes e8, and black has seen that, but they thought they would be okay. King d7, king h5, king e6, king takes h6, king takes f6, and now g4 move, which totally enables black king to move because of weakness of g5 pawn. Now eventually black has to move the king. White gonna play a4, and then white can play king h5, king h6 until king moves the pawn and then leaves the pawn, and then white wins easily. You see, black, and this is common mistake, common to miss it, because black sees the problem that their king and rook so passive, though they will do anything at all, try to come out with a king. They didn't calculate pawn ending far enough to realize that they lose by force. As bad as this position is, which is bad, well, better was to play maybe rook c8 and on king g4, king e8, and then try to play rook c6 and attack this pawn to get some, at least they don't lose by force. And after rook e6 they do lose by force. White transposes the pawn endgame, as we just saw. This is very, very typical mistake. Now I want to go to one more rook ending where black, by mistake, people are so much afraid of playing position with a pawn down, and they much rather allow some complications or even go to pawn ending without carefully evaluating it. So here is the position, and black is a pawn down. Black is a pawn down, and they see a golden opportunity to take this pawn after they moving rook away with the check. So black played rook f7, king g2, d takes e, but that allows rook d8 check going to pawn ending, and that was fatal for black. Now let's talk from this position. Well, black should have done king f7 and e takes d, c takes d, and their pawn down. White has good winning chances, but then again there is no instant win for white. White has still to demonstrate some technique here. However, after black played rook f7 check and white played king g2, of course king g2 and not e2, because on king e2 rook e7 may be strong. So king g2, and after black took, here comes the main rule of the pawn ending. White exchanges rook, and what do we get? King f3, king e7, king e4, king e6 or d6, it doesn't make difference. And now you see white has 3 pawns on a queen side versus 2, and one of the main rules, maybe the most important rule in pawn ending, to have an outside pass pawn. These pawns will, queenside pawns, gonna move eventually, and they will create pass pawn, and black's king is gonna go to queenside to eliminate that pass pawn, and then white will penetrate on a king side. Let's see how it's gonna happen. b4, king d6, c4, king e6, a4, and eventually white makes pass pawn. There is nothing black can do. Pass pawn will be made. Well, in this case, white just makes the queen after a6. But even they couldn't make the queen. Suppose they can take. That's an easy win for white, because they go b7, king takes e5, and after king takes b7, king will penetrate, winning both black pawns. So black was so preoccupied and so much concerned about deficit of one pawn, they wanted to get this pawn back for any cost, and cost was really very high. On rook f7, king g2, de. Never go to any pawn ending, whether you have an extra pawn, whether you think you are better, until you know the result, because in pawn ending most of the time it's, as I already mentioned, it's a win, a lose, a draw. Here, now how you do not deter, you cannot calculate all the way through when you make the queen and you win all the pawns. Here you have to know the result. The result is this. All you have to calculate is that you come with the king to e4, you make it, and then eventually you can make the pass pawn on the queen side. You have to know that, well, it doesn't matter which move you make first here, you make the pass pawn. Once you make the pass pawn, if you can foresee this, and then you know that you win this pawn ending. So general rule is, once you have a pass pawn, outside pass pawn, you win. So this pawn ending was totally lost for black. Now let me show you one position I witnessed, and I was very much surprised. I was almost shocked to see what happened in this game. And this is the position. Black is in check. Black played rook g6, and white in this position. I was amazed. White played rook takes g6, and it's total, pawns are even, so and it's total loss for white, because king takes g6. Now, do you have to calculate this? No, you don't have to calculate. This is one type of position that is clearly won by black. Here is the principle you use. You see, black has h pawn, white has f pawn. H pawn is outside pass pawn, f pawn is not. What makes h pawn outside pass pawn? The main battle will be on the queen side, those pawns versus those pawns. Neither one of f pawn or h pawn is gonna queen. So those pawns, after they pushed all the way, they will be taken by opponent's king. So what is gonna happen? Black is gonna push the pawn even in this position until white king will take it. White king when takes the h pawn, then black will take f pawn, and you see that black's king is much closer to white's pawns, and that's why this is absolutely lost for white. Now, what should have they done? If they go rook g2, it's the same thing. It's totally lost for white because same h pawn on f pawn. The only move that would make a draw here is rook g3, because now no matter what happens, black cannot get h pawn versus f pawn, and in this position now h pawn does not consider to be outside pawn because it's held by white's g pawn. You may think that, well, maybe black eventually takes the g pawn, and when white takes h pawn, black's king is going to be closer. Yeah, but this is not going to happen because after king g2, king g5, king f3, h5, king f2, anytime pawns exchange, it will be in white's favor, because if black goes h4, then white's king is closer to black's pawns going to the queen side. And if black goes king g4, king g2, they cannot make progress. There is no way for black to exchange pawns and at the same time being closer to white's pawns. That's why black has to just go back and forth, which will be a draw, or even if white goes here, that's still a draw, and neither side has any advantage because both kings are same distance from the queen side, which means game is absolutely drawn. So here again the key, let me outline the key rule here in this position. Never give your opponent an outside pass pawn in pawn ending, or try to get outside pass pawn if you can get yourself. So this was horrible mistake, and white is totally lost, and this is a draw, not allowing your opponent to get an outside pass pawn. Very, very important critical endgame, which everyone has to know by rules. You cannot take and calculate now what is going to happen. No, calculation is out of question. You have to know the theory. Theory said if pawns are identical on the queen side, on the opposite side, then on the other side of the board, outside pass pawn is totally decisive, and that's what the case we have here. Now there is another rule in the rook ending which I want to show you. This is very important and very subtle position that was played between Emanuel Lasker. It was a long time ago, and I'm not sure, it was in 1894, I'm not sure if this endgame rules were known then. Emanuel Lasker is playing black, and he played rook takes d4, and after rook takes d4, game is drawn. It gets to pawn ending, which we're going to talk about now. The better move that gives little more chance is rook c3. It's still very difficult for black to win, but after rook takes d4, king e3, rook takes d2, king takes d2, this position is a draw. This is actually very, very instructive to see why this is a draw. This position is a draw because black does not have any of these pawns on the back rank. If one of the pawn stands on a back rank, black wins. And the main reason why, because we're gonna get eventually position where white's king will have to move back. And white here calculates they have to go king b1 or king a1. And let's look in this position what will happen if white go king b1 and what will happen if white can go to king a1. Let's look at it. On king b1, if white goes king b1, king a3, king a1, b4, king a2, a5, king a1, a4, king b1, b3, pawn takes, king a1. This is a draw. This is a draw because after b2, king b1, black cannot win. So, in this position, white makes correct move, and they draw, and if they go king a1, they lose because king a3, b4, a5, a4, b3, and b2. So we now determined that we clarified that king b1 is a draw, king a1 is losing. Now let's say one of black pawns is on a7. Now white loses no matter whose move is it. If they go king b1 or king a1, they lose. If they go king b1, king a3, king a1, now black plays a6 first. You see, they have, depending on whose move is it, black is going to play a6 or a5. And if black goes a6, they win, because on king b1, a5, king a1, b4, king b1, a4, king a1, b3, pawn takes, king b1, b2. Black wins. So in this position, black goes a6, and if king is on b1, black will go a5. So the key here is to have a flexibility for one of your pawns. If you have flexibility to move this pawn on one square or two squares, you win sort of pawn opposition. So with king on b1 you go a5, and with king on a1 you go a6. That's why when this 2-1, 2 versus 1 pawns, if one of black's pawns stand on the back rank, they absolutely winning no matter whose move it is. And I believe, I cannot say for certain, but I believe in 1894, when this position was played, this rule was not known.